The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence you feel when you are finally alone after a long day. This was the kind of silence that fills a room when someone has just said something that changes your entire life. I was sitting in a small conference room at my bank, staring at a brown folder placed carefully in front of me. My name was printed across the top. Emily Carter. I was 38 years old, successful, financially responsible, and someone who had spent most of my adult life making sure I never owed anyone anything. But according to the woman sitting across from me, I had almost $80,000 in unpaid loans attached to my name. Loans I never requested. Loans I never approved. Loans I never even knew existed. The bank officer adjusted her glasses and looked down at the papers again. "Emily, I understand this is difficult to hear," she said softly. "But our records show these accounts were opened using your personal information." I remember looking at her and thinking there had to be some mistake, because mistakes happen. Banks make mistakes. Computers make mistakes. People misunderstand things. But families? Families are supposed to protect you. They are supposed to be the one place where you do not have to question someone's intentions. I slowly opened the folder. The first document was an application form. The second was a copy of my identification. The third was a signature. My signature. Or at least, someone had tried to make it look like mine. My hands did not shake. That surprised me. I expected anger. I expected tears. I expected my heart to break right there in that office. Instead, I felt something colder. I felt clarity. Because deep inside, I already knew who was connected to those loans. My parents, David and Linda Carter, and my younger brother, Ryan. The same people who spent years telling me that family always takes care of each other. The same people who called me the responsible one, the dependable one, the daughter who could always handle things. What they never realized was that the daughter who always stayed quiet had learned how to pay attention. And now I was holding proof that the people I trusted most had used my name to protect their own secrets. Before I tell you how my family reached that point, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the person everyone turns to when they need help? The person who is expected to forgive, understand, and sacrifice? Because if you have, you might understand why this betrayal hurt more than money ever could. If you enjoy stories about family, boundaries, and people finding the strength to finally stand up for themselves, make sure you stay until the end. Because the moment I discovered the truth was not the moment my family lost control. That came later. To understand why that bank folder changed everything, I have to take you back to where this story actually began. Back to the family I once believed would never hurt me. I grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone knew everyone. My parents cared deeply about appearances. Our house was always clean before guests arrived. My mother made sure the curtains were perfect, the kitchen counters were spotless, and every family photo showed smiling faces. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family people admired. My father, David, worked hard and believed reputation mattered. My mother, Linda, was the type of person who remembered every neighbor's birthday, but could forget when someone in her own house needed emotional support. I was their oldest child. Their daughter who followed the rules. Their daughter who got good grades, showed up on time, and rarely caused problems. My younger brother, Ryan, was different. Ryan had a personality that filled every room. He was funny, confident, and charming. People naturally liked him. My parents loved saying things like, "Ryan has such a gift with people." And he did, but somewhere along the way, that charm became an excuse. When Ryan failed, people said he was learning. When I struggled, people said I needed to be stronger. I was the child who was expected to understand. Ryan was the child who was expected to be supported. I remember realizing this difference when I was in college. I had saved money from my part-time job because I wanted to avoid student debt. I was proud of myself. When I told my parents I had managed my finances carefully, my father smiled and said, "That's good, Emily. Maybe you can teach Ryan some responsibility." It sounded like a compliment. But somehow, even my success became another way for me to help him. That pattern followed me into adulthood. Whenever I achieved something, the conversation eventually returned to Ryan. My promotion became a discussion about his career. My savings became a discussion about his expenses. My stability became something everyone felt comfortable depending on. I did not realize it then, but my family had quietly assigned me a role. I was not the daughter they celebrated. I was the daughter they relied on. And for many years, I believed those two things were the same. Until the day I discovered exactly how much they had taken from me. For most of my life, I did not think of myself as someone who was mistreated. That might sound strange after everything I have told you, but it is the truth. When you grow up inside a certain family dynamic, you do not always recognize the unfairness while you are living through it. You simply adapt. You convince yourself that this is what love looks like. You tell yourself that every family has problems. You tell yourself that being the strong one is something to be proud of. And that is exactly how I spent years ignoring the signs. I became the person everyone called when something went wrong. When my parents needed help understanding paperwork, they called me. When Ryan needed money for something unexpected, they called me. When family plans changed at the last minute, they called me. But when something good happened in my life, the excitement never lasted very long. I remember the day I received my first major promotion. I was 31 years old, sitting in my car outside my office, staring at the email on my phone. I had worked for years to get there. Late nights, extra training, certifications, sacrificing weekends while other people were relaxing. I was proud of myself. I called my parents because I wanted to share the moment with them. My mother answered first. "Oh, Emily, that's wonderful," she said. For a few seconds, I felt happy. Then she added, "You know, this could actually help Ryan. Maybe you could talk to him about finding something more stable." I remember sitting there quietly. My promotion had lasted less than 10 seconds before it became about my brother. I told myself not to take it personally. That was something I had become very good at. Not taking things personally. When Ryan bought a car he could not comfortably afford, my father said, "He just needs a little guidance." When I bought my first home after years of saving, my mother said, "Are you sure you're not being too independent?" That sentence stayed with me, because I started noticing something. Whenever Ryan needed support, it was because life had been unfair to him. Whenever I succeeded, it was because I was expected to handle everything myself. The difference became even clearer after my grandmother passed away. There was a small family inheritance, nothing enormous, just enough money to help each grandchild start something meaningful. My grandmother had always encouraged me to invest in my future. She used to tell me, "Emily, you are the one who thinks ahead. Never let anyone make you feel guilty for being responsible." At the time, I thought she was just being kind. Years later, I realized she understood my family better than I did. Because after the inheritance was discussed, my parents immediately started talking about Ryan. They said he was trying to start a business. They said he needed a chance. They said family should help family. And somehow, once again, the responsibility quietly moved toward me. I was expected to understand. I was expected to sacrifice. I was expected to be the person who fixed things. I wish I could say there was one single moment when I realized I had been treated differently, but there wasn't. It happened slowly. A comment here, a request there, a favor that became an expectation, a gift that became an obligation. The most dangerous thing about being used is that it rarely begins with something obvious. It begins with something small, a simple request, a simple favor, a simple sentence like, "Your family, why wouldn't you help?" And because I loved them, I kept helping. That was the part they counted on. They knew I was not someone who wanted conflict. They knew I hated disappointing people. They knew I would rather carry a burden myself than watch someone else struggle. And eventually, they stopped seeing my kindness as a gift. They started seeing it as a resource they had unlimited access to. The first real warning sign came about 2 years before the bank called me. My father had started talking about Ryan's business idea. According to him, it was going to be a huge opportunity. Ryan wanted to open a small technology services company. At first, I was happy for him. I wanted him to succeed. Despite everything, he was still my brother. But then my father called me one evening and said something that I did not think much about at the time. "Emily, Your brother just needs a little support getting started." I was standing in my kitchen, holding a cup of coffee, listening to the familiar request coming from the other end of the phone. "What kind of support?" I asked. There was a pause, the kind of pause that tells you someone is choosing their words carefully. "Well," my father said, "there may be some paperwork involved." I should have asked more questions. I should have slowed down. I should have trusted the feeling in my stomach. But instead, I did what I had always done. I believed my family, and that belief was exactly what they used against me. Because what my family did not know was that while they were busy seeing me as the daughter who would always rescue them, I had quietly built a life where I no longer needed anyone's approval. They did not know about the career I had built. They did not know how much I understood about financial records. They did not know that the person they thought would simply sign whatever they placed in front of her was someone who spent her professional life finding mistakes hidden inside documents. They underestimated me, and that would become their biggest mistake. My hidden life they never saw. By the time my family started asking for paperwork, I had already spent almost a decade working in financial compliance. My job was not glamorous. I was not someone who appeared on television or had a title people immediately recognized, but I knew systems, I knew documentation, I knew how financial institutions tracked information, I knew that every decision left behind a record, every application, every approval, every signature, every digital footprint. My family knew I had a stable job, but they never really understood what I did. To them, I was simply the office person. They never asked about my certifications. They never asked about the projects I managed. They never asked how many hours I spent learning regulations and protecting people from financial mistakes. They only saw the result: Emily has a good job. Emily is responsible. Emily can handle it. What they did not understand was that responsibility comes with awareness, and awareness eventually reveals the truth. I had also quietly built my own financial security. I bought my house without their help. I created an emergency fund. I invested carefully, not because I wanted to prove anything, but because I had always known that depending completely on other people was dangerous. I never told my parents every detail about my finances, not because I was hiding something, because I had learned that information in my family often became something people felt entitled to use. Still, I never imagined they would cross the line they eventually crossed. I thought they might ask too much. I thought they might pressure me. I thought they might make me feel guilty. But I never imagined they would use my name, my identity, my trust. The first time I looked closely at the documents from the bank, something immediately bothered me. There were details that did not make sense, information that connected back to conversations I had only had with my family. And slowly, a frightening possibility started forming in my mind. This was not a mistake. Someone had planned this, and before I could confront anyone, I needed to know exactly what they had done, because for the first time in my life, I was not going to protect my family from the consequences of their choices. I was going to protect myself. The hardest part about betrayal is not always discovering what someone did. Sometimes, the hardest part is accepting that the people who did it were people you once trusted completely. For weeks after I found those documents, I felt like I was living two different lives. During the day, I was still Emily Carter, the person who went to work, answered emails, attended meetings, and helped people solve financial problems. But privately, I was trying to understand how my own family had created a financial mess using my identity. I kept asking myself the same question. How could they do this? How could my parents, the same people who taught me right from wrong, convince themselves that this was acceptable? And then I realized something painful. They did not suddenly become different people. They had been showing me who they were for years. I was just finally willing to see it. During that difficult period, there was one person who noticed something was wrong before I even explained everything. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. Sarah and I had worked together for almost 6 years. She was one of the few people in my life who knew me outside my family role. She did not know me as the daughter who fixed problems. She knew me as Emily, the person who loved quiet mornings, organized everything in color-coded folders, and always carried extra pens because someone usually needed one. One evening, we were sitting at a small coffee shop near my office. I had finally told her everything: the loans, the documents, the possibility that my family had been involved. She listened without interrupting. That was something I appreciated about Sarah. She never rushed to give advice before understanding the pain. After a few minutes, she looked at me and said, "Emily, can I tell you something?" I nodded. "You keep asking how they could do this to you. But I think the bigger question is why they believed they were allowed to." That sentence stayed with me. Because she was right. My family did not just make a bad financial decision. They believed my boundaries did not matter. They believed my love for them would always be stronger than my anger. They believed I would clean up another mess, like I had done before. Sarah encouraged me to speak with someone who understood the legal side of the situation. That was how I met Daniel Brooks. Daniel was a financial attorney who specialized in identity disputes and documentation issues. When I first sat across from him, I expected him to immediately tell me what action to take. Instead, he asked questions. Simple questions. When did your parents request your identification? Who had access to your documents? Did you ever sign anything related to Ryan's business? Did anyone pressure you to move quickly? The more questions he asked, the more I realized how many details I had ignored. Daniel reviewed every document carefully. He placed the papers on his desk in organized groups. Loan application, verification forms, communication records, submission dates. Everything had a place. Everything told a story. And slowly, that story became clearer. "This does not look like a misunderstanding," Daniel finally said. I remember those words. Because part of me had still been hoping there was some innocent explanation. Maybe someone made a mistake. Maybe Ryan misunderstood something. Maybe my parents were careless but not dishonest. But Daniel's expression told me the truth was harder than I wanted it to be. "Someone knew what they were doing," he said. I looked down at the documents. For years, I had protected my family from embarrassment. Now I was realizing they had been protecting themselves from consequences. Daniel told me not to confront them emotionally. "Do not go in angry," he said. "Go in prepared. The truth is stronger when you have evidence." That became my new approach. I stopped asking why they hurt me. I started asking what proof I needed. I collected everything: emails, messages, bank records, copies of documents, anything connected to the loans. And the more I found, the more one name appeared: Ryan, my younger brother, the child everyone protected, the person my parents always believed deserved another chance. The same person who apparently believed I would always give him one. A few weeks later, I discovered something that changed the entire situation. My parents were planning a family dinner. Not a casual dinner, a celebration. Ryan was preparing to announce that his business was finally turning around. According to the invitation, it was a night to celebrate new beginnings. My mother called me personally. Her voice sounded warm, almost normal. "Emily, I really hope you come," she said. For a moment, hearing her voice almost made me forget everything. "Almost," she continued. "Your brother has worked so hard. This family needs to come together." That phrase, "this family needs to come together." I had heard it before, usually right before someone needed something from me. I asked, "Mom, does this have anything to do with the loans?" There was silence, a long silence. Then she said, "Emily, I don't know why you are making everything so negative." That was when I understood. They were not preparing to apologize. They were preparing to continue pretending. The dinner would be held at an upscale restaurant downtown. My parents had invited relatives, family friends, and several people connected to Ryan's business. They wanted everyone to see Ryan as successful. They wanted everyone to believe the story they had created. And they had no idea that I knew the truth. I spent the days before that dinner reviewing every document with Daniel, not because I wanted revenge, because I needed certainty. I needed to know that when I finally spoke, nobody could twist my words. Nobody could say I misunderstood. Nobody could call me emotional. For the first time in my life, I was preparing to stop being the person who quietly carried everything. I was preparing to let everyone see what had actually happened. And when I walked into that restaurant, I knew my family still believed I was the same Emily they had always controlled. They were about to learn they were wrong. I still remember the first thing I noticed when I walked into that restaurant. The table. It was a long table near the windows, decorated with candles, folded white napkins, and expensive glasses that reflected the city lights outside. It looked like a celebration. And that was exactly what my family wanted everyone to believe. My mother stood up when I arrived and smiled like nothing had happened. "Emily, you made it," she said. The way she said it almost made me question myself. Almost, because that was something my family had always been good at, making me wonder if I was the problem. I smiled politely and sat down. Around the table were my parents, Ryan, several relatives, and some of Ryan's business friends. Everyone was excited. Everyone was congratulating Ryan. My father lifted his glass. "To new beginnings," he said. Everyone smiled. Everyone clapped. And I sat there listening to people celebrate a success built partly on something they did not know about. A success built on my name. Ryan looked confident. That confidence bothered me more than anger would have. Because he truly believed he deserved to be sitting there. He believed the story he had created. He talked about his business struggles and how difficult it had been to take risks. Then he looked across the table at me. "You know," he said with a laugh, "some people spend their whole lives afraid to make big moves." A few people smiled. I knew exactly what he meant. He was talking about me. The careful one. The responsible one. The person who planned before acting. My father laughed. "Emily has always been like that," he said. "She worries too much." Everyone laughed lightly. A small joke. A harmless comment. At least that was how they wanted it to appear. But I felt something inside me change. Because for years, I had sat quietly while people reduced me to a personality trait. Careful, serious, responsible. They never understood that those qualities were the reason I survived. Then Ryan started talking about his business expansion. He told everyone how proud he was that the family had supported him. "My family really came through when I needed them," he said. That sentence almost made me smile. Because I finally understood. He was not embarrassed. He was grateful. Not because they had helped him. Because they had protected him. My mother reached across the table and touched my hand. "Emily has always been so generous," she said. There it was. The expectation. The reminder of my role. The person who gives. The person who helps. The person who never says no. Then my father looked at me. "Actually, Emily, there is something we wanted to talk about." I already knew. My stomach tightened. "Ryan's business is at an important stage," he continued. "There are some temporary financial issues. Nothing serious." Temporary, that word. People often use temporary when they want someone else to carry their problem. My father continued. "We were hoping you could help one more time." The entire table went quiet. Everyone looked at me, waiting, expecting. The old Emily would have smiled. The old Emily would have asked how much. The old Emily would have tried to solve the problem before understanding it. But I was not that person anymore. I looked at my father, then at Ryan, then at my mother, and calmly asked, "Can we talk about the loans already taken out in my name?" The room changed instantly. It was almost physical, like someone had turned off the music in the background. Ryan stopped smiling. My mother's hand moved away from mine. My father looked confused. "What are you talking about?" he asked. I watched their faces carefully, not because I wanted to see them suffer, because I wanted to see the truth. And the truth was there. In their expressions, in the sudden silence, in the way Ryan looked at my parents before answering. "Emily, I think you're misunderstanding something." That sentence. That was the sentence people use when they want you to doubt yourself. I opened my bag. I placed a folder on the table, not aggressively, not dramatically, just carefully. The same way Daniel had told me to. "I don't think I'm misunderstanding anything," I said. My mother looked around the table. "Emily, this is not the place for this." I looked at her. The irony almost hurt, because this was the place they had chosen to celebrate a lie. They wanted an audience when things looked good. Now they did not want one when the truth arrived. My father lowered his voice. "Do you know how embarrassing this is?" And that sentence told me everything. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "How did this happen to you?" Not, "We need to explain." The first thing he worried about was embarrassment. I took a breath. I know exactly how serious this is, I said. And that's why everyone here deserves to know. I opened the folder. Inside were copies of the loan applications, the documents, the dates, the records, the proof. Ryan leaned forward. His confidence was gone. "What are you doing?" he asked. I looked at him. "I'm finally stopping this." The first document I placed on the table was the loan application. My name, my information, my address, everything connected to me, but not something I had ever requested. My relatives started looking at each other. The business friends who had been celebrating Ryan's success suddenly became quiet. My mother immediately tried to explain. "Emily, you're making this sound worse than it is." I looked at her. "Am I?" She did not answer, because she knew. Then Ryan said the words I expected. "You were going to be paid back." There it was. The excuse. Not denial, not confusion, just justification. I looked at him. "You used my identity without asking me." He looked away. My father stepped in. "We were trying to help your brother." I nodded slowly, and that was the moment I realized something. They still did not understand. They thought the problem was that I found out. They did not understand that the problem was what they chose to do. I reached into the folder and pulled out the final document. The one Daniel had highlighted, the one that connected everything. A message from Ryan. An email. A sentence that destroyed every excuse they had. Because in that message, Ryan had written, "Emily will probably help. She always fixes things." The table became silent. Completely silent. My brother's face changed. My mother covered her mouth. My father stared at the paper. And for the first time, they were not looking at me as the daughter who would rescue them. They were looking at me as someone they had underestimated. Someone who had proof. Someone who was done being their solution. I closed the folder. Because the truth was no longer hidden, and now they had to face what they had spent years avoiding. For a few seconds after I placed that email on the table, nobody moved. It was strange how quickly a room could change. 10 minutes earlier, Ryan had been sitting there like the successful businessman everyone should admire. My parents had been smiling proudly, the people around the table had been congratulating him, and now everyone was staring at a single printed page. Not because it was complicated, because it was simple. The truth usually is. Ryan looked at me first. "Emily, you're taking that message out of context." His voice was different now. The confidence was gone. I looked at him calmly. "What context makes it okay to use my information without asking me?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Because there was no answer. My father reached for the paper. "Let me see that." I slid the page toward him. He read it slowly. I watched his face change, not because he suddenly understood how much they hurt me, but because he understood something else. The evidence was real. The excuse they had planned was falling apart. My mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Emily, you know we never meant to hurt you." That sentence was one I had heard many times before, not after someone took responsibility, usually after someone got caught. I took a deep breath. "I believe you didn't think about how much this would hurt me," I said. "But that doesn't make it okay." The restaurant around us had become strangely quiet. The people at nearby tables were not listening openly, but I could feel the attention, the uncomfortable silence, the feeling that something important was happening. One of Ryan's business friends, a man named Mark, looked between him and my parents. "Wait," he said carefully. "Are these loans connected to the company?" Ryan looked uncomfortable. My father immediately answered, "This is a family matter." But that was exactly the problem. They had always used the word family as a shield. Whenever they needed something from me, family mattered. Whenever I needed honesty, suddenly everything became private. I looked at my father. "You're right, family matters." He looked at me. "That's why this hurts." I explained that I had spent years believing I was helping people I loved. I had helped with bills. I had helped with paperwork. I had answered late-night phone calls. I had forgiven things I should have questioned. But there was a difference between helping someone and allowing them to use you. And they had crossed that line. Ryan shook his head. "You're acting like we stole from you." I looked at him. "You used my name to create debt I never agreed to." The words sat between us. Nobody could soften them. Nobody could rewrite them. My father leaned closer. "Emily, Think carefully about what you're doing. This could damage your brother." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because after everything, he was still protecting Ryan. Even now, even here, the same pattern. Ryan's mistakes became emergencies. My pain became an inconvenience. I looked around the table, at my parents, at my brother, at the people who had watched me carry responsibility for years. Then I said something I had been afraid to say for most of my life. I am not responsible for saving people who keep putting me in danger. Nobody responded, because that was the first time I had ever said it out loud. Daniel had told me the truth did not need anger behind it. It needed facts. And that was what I brought. Facts. The bank records, the documents, the timeline, the email, everything. A few minutes later, Daniel called me to confirm that the bank had received the documentation needed to begin their review. I did not put him on speaker. I did not need to. The truth was already sitting at the table. My mother started crying quietly. "I just don't understand how our family got here." I looked at her, and honestly, neither did I, because families rarely destroy trust in one dramatic moment. They do it through hundreds of small choices. Every time someone decides your feelings matter less, every time someone assumes you will forgive, every time someone takes your kindness as permission. That was how we got there. Not because of one loan, because of years of believing I would always accept being the responsible one. The following days were difficult. The bank investigation moved forward. The disputed accounts were reviewed. Documents were verified. Communication records were examined. And slowly, the reality of what happened became impossible to ignore. Ryan's business partners started asking questions. People who had admired his confidence began wondering whether they had been seeing the complete picture. His reputation had been built on the idea that everything was under control. But the foundation was weaker than anyone knew. My parents struggled too, not just because of the financial consequences, because people around them started asking questions. Relatives who had always praised Ryan began remembering moments they had ignored. They remembered how often I was expected to help, how often Ryan received another chance, how often I was told to be understanding. Some of them apologized, others simply became quiet, and strangely, the silence felt different this time. Before, silence meant I was alone. Now, silence meant people were finally seeing the truth. But the biggest change was inside me. For years, I thought setting boundaries meant losing my family. I thought saying no meant I was selfish. I thought protecting myself meant I was hurting others. But I learned something important. A boundary is not a punishment. A boundary is a decision about what you will no longer allow. And for the first time in my life, I made a decision without asking whether everyone else would approve. I chose myself. But choosing myself did not mean the story was over. Because after everything came out, my family did something I expected. They came back, not with documents, not with explanations, with apologies. And I had to decide whether those apologies were real, or whether they were just another attempt to bring me back into the same role I had finally escaped. For the first few weeks after everything came out, I thought the hardest part was over. I thought once the truth was revealed, everything would become simple. I was wrong. Because discovering the truth is one battle. Living with what the truth changes is another. My family started reaching out almost immediately. At first, it was my mother. She sent long messages late at night. Messages that started with apologies, but quickly became explanations. "I know we made mistakes. I hope you understand we were under pressure. We never wanted things to go this far." I read those messages more than once, not because I was unsure of what happened, because a part of me was still grieving. That was the part people do not always talk about when they discuss betrayal. You do not only lose trust, you lose the version of the future you imagined. For years, I believed that no matter what happened, my family would be there. I believed birthdays, holidays, and important moments would always bring us together. I believed that if I loved people enough, they would eventually understand how much I cared. But love without respect becomes exhausting, and I was exhausted. A few days later, my father called. I almost did not answer, but something inside me wanted to hear what he had to say. "Emily," he said quietly. His voice sounded older, tired. "I want you to know that I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, because those were words I had wanted to hear for years, but somehow hearing them after everything felt different. I asked him one question. Dad, what are you sorry for? There was silence. A long pause. I'm sorry that things got out of control. And that answer told me everything. Not, I'm sorry I used your trust. I'm sorry we put your future at risk. I'm sorry we made you feel like your identity belonged to us. Just that things got out of control. As if nobody had made choices. As if everything had simply happened. I realized something in that moment. An apology only matters when someone understands the damage they caused. Otherwise, it is just another way of asking you to make the pain disappear. Ryan reached out next. His message was shorter. Can we talk? I stared at those 3 words for a long time, because that was always how it started. A conversation, a request, a favor, another opportunity for me to become the person who understood. I agreed to meet him once, not because I wanted to repair everything, because I needed closure. We met at a small coffee shop near my office, the same type of place where I had once told Sarah everything. Ryan looked different, not physically, emotionally. The confidence he always carried was gone. He looked uncomfortable. I know you think I'm a terrible person, he said. I shook my head. No, I think you made choices. He looked down. I was trying to save my business. I nodded. I understand that. He seemed surprised. But you still did it. That was the difference. Understanding someone's reason does not erase the consequences of their actions. Ryan apologized. He said he should have asked. He said he thought he could fix everything before I found out. But once again, I heard the same pattern. He was sorry because the plan failed, not because the decision was wrong. I told him something I had spent months learning. I spent my whole life protecting you from the consequences of your choices. He looked at me. I'm not doing that anymore. That was not revenge. That was not cruelty. That was a boundary. Over time, I created distance from my family. Not because I hated them, because I finally respected myself. There is a difference. People sometimes think walking away means you do not care, but sometimes walking away is the only way to stop hurting yourself. I focused on rebuilding. My finances recovered. The bank situation was resolved. My professional reputation remained strong. And slowly, my life became peaceful again. A strange thing happened when I stopped carrying everyone else's problems. I had energy for my own life. I started spending more time with people who appreciated me without needing something from me. People who asked how I was doing and actually wanted the answer. People who celebrated my success without comparing it to someone else's. I started understanding what a healthy relationship felt like. It felt calm. It felt safe. It did not feel like constantly proving your worth. Months later, I stood inside my home one evening, holding a cup of coffee and looking around. The same house I bought through years of hard work. The same place my family once assumed was just another resource they could depend on. But it represented something different now. It represented the moment I chose myself. I thought about the girl I used to be, the daughter who always tried harder, the daughter who apologized first, the daughter who believed being needed meant being loved. I wish I could go back and tell her something. I would tell her, your kindness is valuable. But it does not mean everyone deserves access to you. Your family can matter to you, but you still matter too. And that was the lesson I carried forward. I did not win because my family faced consequences. I won because I stopped waiting for them to recognize my worth. I recognized it myself. If you are listening to my story, and you have ever been the person everyone depended on, the person who always gave more than they received, remember this. You are allowed to have boundaries. You are allowed to protect your peace. And you are allowed to walk away from people who only love the version of you that keeps sacrificing. If this story connected with you, share your thoughts below. Have you ever had to set a boundary with someone you loved? Sometimes the hardest goodbye is not leaving a person. It is leaving behind the version of yourself that believed you had to stay. And for me, that was the beginning of my freedom.